Welcome, y'all, to Parent Empowerment with Mandy Drogin. I'm Mandy. I'm just a mom having real conversations with real parents about what's going on in our Texas schools. And today I'm joined with Anita Scott. Anita is the policy director of the Texas Homeschool Coalition. She's also a former educator, former administrator, and was homeschooled herself. Anita, welcome.
Mandy, thank you so much for this invitation and this opportunity to be on the podcast. I'm delighted. Thank you so very much.
Of course. We're glad you're here. So, Anita, let's hear your story. Can you talk about from childhood when your mother decided to homeschool 8 children and why, and what took you into our education system and now to the Texas Homeschool Coalition?
Well, I would love to share that. So like you said, my mother and my father homeschooled all 8 children. I'm the 4th of 8, and we grew up in a city called Oak Cliff in Dallas. And if you know anything about Oak Cliff, during the 80s and 90s, 2000s, it was just not the best place to live. I can tell you right now that my brother played baseball at a park walking distance from us, and he had to quit the team because there was a drive-by at the park. And the entire team had to duck, and the coach was yelling out, "Stay down, stay down." That was the environment I grew up in. That was the neighborhood I grew up in. We went to bed with helicopter lights flashing through homes, windows of homes, because there was always someone on the run. And so my parents agreed that they would not send their children to the school that was zoned to us because of 5 numbers called our zip code. And they just made a vow that we would not go to the local elementary school, middle school, and high school, because truth is, Mandy, we would have ended up with early pregnancy. Some of us would have been on drugs, and I'm pretty sure some of us would have been in a casket before we even finished high school. And that's just the truth. Our neighbors were a part of gangs. Our neighbors had already spent time in juvenile detention centers, alternative schools, in junior high. And so they just refused to send us to the school zoned for us by our district. And so they homeschooled all 8 of us. I remember waking up early and getting dressed and putting on our shoes to go to the living room. And literally, I remember our family pictures coming off the wall, and the periodic table of elements went up on the wall. Like, I remember the transition. And so, like you said, they homeschooled all 8 of us. And to even give you context for that reason, my mother actually had a teacher certification and her bachelor's in English and actually began teaching at the public school in the 70s. And at one point, she was teaching in a classroom and a student threw a chair at her. And this was in the 70s, Mandy. This was in the 70s.
Wow.
And she got called to the principal's office, and the principal asked her what she did wrong. And she realized, wait a minute, if this child will not receive a consequence, that means accountability is leaving the public school system. And that's when she decided, her and my father, our children will be held accountable, and they will be held accountable to high standards. We will homeschool them. We will direct the education that's put in front of them. So that's how it started. And from then, I ended up, ironically enough, transitioning out of a homeschool high school education. And when I graduated, I started teaching at a school in South Dallas, very close to Oak Cliff where I grew up. So it was like full circle, if you will. And I taught middle school there I taught middle school in South Dallas and a city called Irving. And that entire time span was about 6 years. And then I moved over to middle school administration, where I was a middle school assistant principal and then a principal. And my heart would consistently break when I would have conversations with parents about the challenges their children were enduring because of the zip code. And I kept a box of Kleenex on my desk as tears would fall down their eyes, and they would say, there's nowhere else to send them. We don't have any other options. It's either military school or this school. We don't have money for private school. And this will be a 2-parent home or a single parent home, a 3-generation home. But they would say, Miss Scott, this is it. They've got to get it here, or where else are we going to send them? And what do you say? That's just heart-wrenching. That's heartbreaking when they know that they are going to a school that may not offer them the best, not just that day, but for long term. And so my move over to policy was because I thought, the zeal and the passion is not only being snuffed out of parents when they're sending their kids to school, but it's been snuffed out of educators. Every teacher signs up to change the world. No teacher signs up to say, I can't wait to get my 403B started. I can't wait to get my no teacher is trying to get rich, right? And we all know that. But teacher zeal is then overturned by the bureaucracy. And I decided I want to do more than endure the bureaucracy and try to help my teachers survive, but I wanted to move over to policy to start to engage and make best decisions at the legislative efforts. And that's what brought me over to the Texas Homeschool Coalition.
Thank you for sharing that story. It's amazing. I have 3 little children myself, and I can only imagine your mama is a strong woman, as are any homeschool moms. I mean, my hat's off to you, because that is, just to be responsible, to raise children in the way that they should go, and responsible to educate them and prepare them is truly a calling. So again, hats off to your mom. Wow, 8 of you. That's amazing. And all homeschool moms. So at the Texas Homeschool Coalition, the largest homeschool organization here in Texas, you all are truly at the forefront of the legal battles within the state legislature as it comes to policy-related issues, but quite frankly, on the front lines representing the moms and dads of Texas who have made the courageous decision to homeschool their children. And I know that recently you all have been in the news for a mother who's removed her child from the public school system and gave notice, followed all, just saying, hey, we're going to do homeschooling, which is all that's required in the state of Texas. And you all have fought to defend that. And the school system didn't take that too lightly. They were, it seems like, a little upset that the dollars were following the child, and mom got a knock at the door. Can you tell us that story, please?
Absolutely. So you are referencing Veronica Rodriguez, who chose to withdraw her son and began to homeschool him. And she made this decision in the spring. And like you said, legally in Texas, that's all you need to do is email the school and say, I am choosing to withdraw. You don't even have to show up in person. You don't even have to send certified mail. Texas is one of the freest states to homeschool, and she opted into that decision. And when she withdrew her child, no more than 6 weeks later, she received a letter stating that she was truant and needed to appear in court. And it began listing the days that her son was truant, air quotes, if you will. And so she replied with documentation that said, on this day that you said he was truant, I provided you a doctor's note. On this day that you said he was truant, I provided you a note of emergency. And so she went to truant court thinking, I will go ahead and plead guilty, and then I'll just pay this fine and I'll move on. That was her thought process. Unbeknownst to her, when she pled guilty, that led an onslaught of attacks from the judge and the justice of the peace. And they began berating her for her decision to homeschool. And they began demanding and mandating to see her curriculum, the name of the curriculum, the hours. And they began letting her know if they didn't receive that on a weekly basis, she had a date set for May 24th to reappear in court. And if she did not have all of that documentation, she was told that she would go to jail.
Holy cow. And that's where the Texas Homeschool Coalition stepped in and said,
Correct.
Nay.
You are right.
That's not happening. We're
That's
protecting
right.
our homeschooling. Right. There you were.
Yes.
So y'all stepped in.
Yes.
Stepped into the legal side of things.
Yes.
To fight and defend for this mom and make sure that the elected officials knew that the government had absolutely zero right to step in and try and take over any control from this mom who had chosen to homeschool her son.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially because she even voiced that her son was having some health challenges. And so when she was considered truant, she was reminding the school, no, I already voiced and sent a note saying we were going to the doctor. We were going to the doctor for this reason. And so, like you said, the government has zero ability and zero permission to mandate that type of ineffective, but also illegal mandate and requirement. And so, like you said, THSC, we stepped in and we found her a lawyer because she lives in Midland, and we found her a lawyer who was ready to represent her at the court date. Now, here's the crazy thing, Mandy. She arrived for court. Her attorney arrived. The judge was a no-show, and no one from the school was there also to represent Midland ISD. And when the attorney asked the court clerk, where is everyone? And they said, oh, we don't have it on file that you all was supposed to reappear for court. That was never supposed to happen. And we recognized that it was because this started to gain some momentum and started to gain some name identity and some press release. And so now the attorney has filed again for a court case because we need these charges dropped.
Right.
We don't need this hanging over the family's head or lingering and hovering as if she did something wrong when she did absolutely nothing wrong. So you're right. THSC steps in, and sometimes we have to move over from advocacy to litigation. And if that's what we need to do to defend a Texas homeschool family, then that's just what we'll do.
Well, God bless y'all for stepping in and doing that and being there for that mom who was making the best choice for her child.
Right.
Share with us some of the other legal battles that you all have waded into to protect your homeschool families that are a part of the Texas Homeschool Coalition.
Absolutely. So I love sharing stories from advocacy to litigation. We had a mom who reached out to us and said, my son just enrolled at a college in Houston. 10 days after his classes started, the college went to the son. In fact, I have the information right here. The college went to the son and said, this homeschool high school diploma is not valid and we don't recognize it as bona fide or legitimate. They unenrolled him. They took all of his school supplies from earbuds to technology to school books, and they told him not to return until he brought his GED. They unenrolled him. He was on a tract. And so we had a member of our policy/advocacy team write a letter to the college. I then followed up and communicated with the college. The mom then wrote us this little brief snippet of a testimony. She said, good evening, Anita. Because of your intervention, my son has transitioned back to his regular studies with ease, and I want to thank you and the Texas Homeschool Coalition for making his return to school possible. My son is enjoying his classes immensely, and he told me to tell every one of you how grateful he is to you for your quick action and devoted support. That's just one of the simple ways we advocate and intervene. You know, Mandy, we had a family, a 3-generation family, who went to the DMV at 4 a.m. in the morning to stand in line in order to get a Texas ID for the 9-year-old. The grandfather stood in line. The mother, his daughter, couldn't go because she was physically impaired and was blind. And so the grandfather took the 9-year-old, his granddaughter, to receive her Texas ID. Do you know that when they arrived, not only did a staffer yell at them for attempting to give a homeschool child a Texas ID, the manager came out and yelled at them and made them leave the DMV.
Why?
Because they said a homeschooler has no right to have a Texas ID. And they took, yes. And they took their social security number. I know you're chuckling, right? But this is real.
This was so absurd. What?
This is absurd. I know. And they took the social security number, the VOE, which is the verification of education, and they took a proof of ID. And the manager yelled at them. The grandmother called me that very day in tears, and she said, Are we making the right decision to homeschool? We can't even get a Texas ID, and we've been in line since 4 a.m. I not only called Austin, but I also called this DMV location. And then I called the grandmother back and said, tomorrow, when you go back, have your husband put me on speakerphone. And if he needs to, pass the phone over so that I can speak to this representative. Well, the next day I didn't hear from this member family. Hours went by and I'm waiting for my phone to ring so I can issue and just state, statute. I called the grandmother and she said, we don't know what happened, but they treated us like royalty. We walked in and that same representative took our paperwork and took our documentation and gave us what we needed. And so I just, those are just some of the ways that we advocate for families because, truthfully, sometimes agencies and institutions just don't know the law. Well, that's why we're here. We not only help write the law, but we make sure we defend the law for Texas homeschool families.
That's beautiful. I love it. And you also carry the weight of knowing that there are hundreds of thousands of Texas parents that stand with and behind the
Yes.
Texas Homeschool Coalition and the great work that y'all do.
Well said.
Which brings me to another part of your advocacy and work that you do. From the beginning of the Parent Empowerment Coalition, which is a group of dozens of organizations and businesses that are supporting empowering parents with transparency, quality, respect, and choice. And we locked arms with parents, including homeschool parents, and we followed the governor on a mission to ensure that every parent has the freedom to utilize education savings accounts. Y'all were one of the very first to sign on because you have supported giving parents these opportunities. Let's talk a little bit about your families and where the push within the parent empowerment movement for education savings accounts, what you hear among homeschool families, what your polling shows for homeschool families. And let's talk about, then we'll get down to the policy and how we can ensure that homeschool families have the opportunity to participate if they choose, or the opportunity to say, nah, not for me.
Right. Right. You're so right. And I love the fact that you said there's an opportunity to participate. It's not a mandate to participate.
Right.
And one of the reasons I'm so vocal about this opportunity for parental choice through an ESA program, an education savings account program, is because, again, backdate to my homeschooling education. Again, if my parents had sent us to the school that was zoned for us, not all 8 children would be alive. Not all 8 children would be free. Someone would be behind bars. Someone would be in the casket. There would be some early pregnancies. And so when I think about school choice, it's imperative that people know that there are families in some neighborhoods who don't even use their real address when they enroll their children because they want their child to go to a different school. My neighbors did that. Not all of them used their real address because they were thinking, we're not sending them there. They're going to go to that new school, or they're going to go to that middle school way across town. And so when we're talking about choice, why do we need to steal choice? Why do we have to steal choice? And that's what was happening when I was growing up. Parents were stealing the address of their family members to try to advocate for choice. There's no need to steal for choice. Right. I love what the THSC Vice President of Policy and Engagement, his name is Jeremy Newman. You know him very well.
Yes.
One day we were collaborating about this instrument called ESA, this instrument called parental choice. And this is what he told me. I love it because he emailed it to me, and this is what he said. The legislature is capable of pursuing multiple good ideas at the same time. Parties who argue that ESA should not be considered until all other education programs are solved cannot define when that endpoint for that waiting period will be. In the meantime, majorities of parents from every ethnic demographic and every political demographic are clamoring for more options through ESAs. If we continue to refuse to prioritize these options for parents and students, at some point, we have to ask whether we are really serving parents and students anymore or only the system itself. I just thought that was so well
Beautiful.
said.
Yep.
because it's not a or, it's a and.
That's right.
And that's why it's not a mandate, it's an opt-in. And
That's
that's
right.
why it's not a requirement, it's an opportunity. And so when you're talking about, just the research around and the polling around, are homeschool families for this? More than 71% opted to say, we want choice. And that was a Ragnar Research survey done more than a year and a half ago. And so when we're talking about, do homeschoolers really want this? They're cautious. They feel like there may be some strings attached. They're not sure if this is safe. Number one is we should always be cautious when the Texas legislature convenes. We should always be cautious.
I say I have a very healthy distrust of government.
Yes. Yes. And so we're not walking in blind going, well, let's just all hope that this works out. It's not about crossing our fingers and just, cringing our teeth and sweating, profuse drops from our eyebrow. But this is about creating legislation, like you said, and writing policy that bulletproofs the needs of parents. And that's why we're boots on the ground at the Capitol in Austin when the Texas legislature convenes, because we're saying, hey, we want to talk to the members. We want to talk to Chairman Creighton. We want to talk to Chairman Buckley. We want to go talk to Senator Paxton. We want to talk to Chairman Frank, because we're writing together language that bulletproofs the needs for our homeschool families.
That's amazing. A battle that I remember well that you all were leading, and if we're just going to say kind of the quiet part out loud, some of the more fringe people that oppose choices for parents in the homeschool, that oppose really what the Homeschool Coalition is fighting for, they fought against you with the UIL bill. Is that right? Or AKA 100%. The Tim Tebow bill, where it was kind of this henny penny, the sky is falling. For those viewers that don't remember what that was saying that kids who are homeschooling should be able to participate in the extracurricular activities that your tax dollars pay for at the local public school. So if you want to provide a great homeschool education, but maybe your son wants to play on the baseball team or the football team, or your daughter wants to be on the swimming team or whatever, that your children should be able to participate in that as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that fight? And tell us, Anita, did the sky fall when we passed that piece of legislation? Did we open up the doors or shut anyone out from homeschooling? Did we open up the doors for government regulations? Tell us about what's going on with that as just a pretty good point of reference for the families who really wanted to ensure that their child not only had a phenomenal homeschool education, but had access to some activities that you can't necessarily do as a homeschooler.
Correct. And you're right. It was a fight. It was a 20-year fight for that UIL bill to pass. 20 years. Florida had passed it a long time ago. Tim Tebow was probably near retirement, when Texas decided to pass this 20-year trek in the trenches, right? So you're right. There was this ideological narrative that promoted this agenda of, if this UIL bill passes and homeschoolers are allowed to participate in sports, the sky is going to fall. Well, Mandy, unless you and I are living under another kind of planet, where the sky did fall, maybe we are wrong. But what we do know is that it did not increase regulation for homeschoolers in any way. And it not only did it not increase regulation for homeschoolers, it expanded opportunities for homeschoolers. There are close to 40 school districts who have opted in to allow homeschoolers to participate in UIL. There's a family in Wiley whose daughter plays volleyball through UIL. Their school won the volleyball championship. Exactly, yes. And that's because when the UIL, the Tim Tebow bill passed in 2021, like you said, that bill was written to bulletproof any kind of regulation or any kind of minimal increase in regulation. There was no option for increase in regulation. The option was, how can we let our homeschool students take part in academic and athletic and artistic competitions? What about the homeschooler who wants to join a choir? And so, like you said, the sky did not fall. And so that same ideological narrative is still being promoted, by the same people who are now saying, if this gift called ESA passes, it is now really going to fall. And it'll
Right.
fall 2.0. It didn't fall off, it did, but that
Right.
hasn't happened. And so that same narrative, we are able to say concretely and with 100% assurance that there are already 30 plus other states who've already passed some form or measure of an ESA program. There are more than 80 programs operating in 30 plus other states. And in no state where there's some form or measure of an ESA program was there an increase in government regulation. There was only an increase in reading scores and only increase in math scores. There was only an increase in passing end of year testing. And so when we're talking about our increase, I'm not sure what people are staring at when they're concerned about the sky falling. We should be thinking the sky is now raising, because we are raising the confidence of our families and we are raising the scores, because we know that our reading scores have plummeted. We know that our math scores have plummeted. COVID only enlightened that plummet and it increased that plummet. Why would we not want to counter that plummet with providing this gift through the ESA program?
Amen. So I do want to ask you, when we're talking about that, have you all had the opportunity? I know when I've been out talking, I've got a lot of families that would like to homeschool, but it's a financial sacrifice. And, when you have two parent households, and if you're removing one parent from the workforce, or you're having to invest in curriculum and activities and whatnot for multiple children, it can really add up. And in this day and age of inflation and just looking at our grocery bills and our tax bills and everything else, have you heard from many families that have said, I'd really love to homeschool, and education savings accounts would open the door for us to be able to take that jump, make the sacrifice of having a parent at home, and ensure that we're providing a really excellent education free from indoctrination in our home?
Yes. Mandy, I heard that when I was a teacher. I heard that when I was an administrator. Those stories that you're referencing right now, they didn't start when I moved over to Texas Homeschool Coalition. I heard those narratives in my office as an administrator. I heard families say, I would homeschool, but I can't. I work graveyard shift. There's no way I can wake up and then focus on my child's academic priority because I do this. Or even if it's a two-parent home, the husband is working and the mom is saying, we both have these commitments and we don't have the finances and we don't have the freedom to homeschool them. And this is what they say. We're left with sending them to public school. We're left. That's what we have to do. We don't get to do it. We have to. Yes. And they want to say we get to homeschool, but they don't have that freedom and that opportunity. Yeah. You and I see each other all the time at the Capitol in hearings and when there's, activity on the floor, either the House or the Senate. And when families recognize me from Texas Homeschool Coalition, they don't mind unapologetically coming up to me and saying, I'm ready to homeschool when this bill passes. We will be able to do this. I know families in Austin, on the outskirts of Austin. I know families in Dallas. I know families in DeSoto. I know families in Irving. I know families in Tarrant County who are saying, when this bill passes, we'll be able to start homeschooling. Right now, we have to send them to this school. But come when that bill passes and crosses the finish line and there's a field goal with the signing from Governor Abbott, then we will get to homeschool. So you're right. Families are dependent on parental choice. It's not just a bonus. People are dependent on it. So some people may say this is the cherry on top. No, the ESA is the ice cream.
I love it.
So it's not the cherry on top. It's essential.
I love the way you say that, well, unfortunately, families told you I have to do this, but really what that education savings account is going to do for families, homeschool families, private school families, blended families, families that are choosing a public school, is that every parent will ultimately say, I get to send my children.
Right.
I get to educate my children in this way. And that's truly what the parent empowerment is all about. If you're, I send my child to an amazing public charter school that I absolutely love. It's a phenomenal classical education, which is what I wanted for my children. I get to send my children there, and what a blessing. And I want every single parent to have the opportunity to say, I get to send my children here, or I get to homeschool my children myself. Anita, in wrapping up, I would love for you just to deliver a message to Texas parents that are homeschooling or are thinking about homeschooling. What would you like to say to them to encourage them to feel empowered and to get involved in ensuring that every single child, their child, the child down the street, has access to an education savings account if needed?
Absolutely. And I love it. And as we're closing, Mandy, thank you again for this opportunity. I feel very honored and very privileged to sit with you and dialogue about this. We just want every single individual to know that THSC is dedicated to empowering families to take the lead on educating their children. And that demonstration of empowerment looks like what you said: legislative efforts, getting involved in the election process, getting involved in policy, advocacy, and oftentimes legal intervention, which oftentimes may lead to litigation. But that's what we do. We don't just write the legislation. We then go and make sure we defend it. We call ourselves watchmen. We are watchmen on the wall. And so when we're talking about this gift of an ESA program, we want parents to know it is a gift, and it's our job. It's all of our jobs to defend it. It's all of our jobs to make sure bill language will never infringe upon parental rights. It's our job to make sure we are vocal and active. It's all of our jobs. And so in these other states where parental choice has passed, it's because people spoke up. And so we need our homeschool families to keep speaking up. Don't be a silent cheerleader on the sidelines, but be active and vocal. Show up at the Capitol beginning in January.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you to everyone at the Texas Homeschool Coalition and all the great work that you do. And thank you to our watchers for joining us on the Parent Empowerment Show with Mandy Drogin. And now you are empowered.